Hey there, it's Olivia Savannah here from Olivia's Catastrophe, and today I'm here to give you my August wrap up. In the month of August I read 13 books and I'm going to try my best to do this all in one video. I'll have content warnings in the description box down below, but without further ado, let's get right down to the books. I'm not really one who's much for reading alongside prize lists like some other booktubers are, but I already had If I Survive You by Jonathan Escoffery, so I thought I should read this as it has been longlisted for the Man Booker Prize. This one is a short story collection and it's interconnected short stories following a Jamaican family who are living in America, and it's around the period where a hurricane comes through. And I did not like these short stories. I could not connect to them. As much as I really love reading about like Jamaican American and Jamaican British people, I felt nothing for any of them. I just felt nothing for this family. They went through trials and tribulations, they went through highs and lows, but I just did not care about the characters. And I think it has something to do with the way that this is written and the writing style, but because I couldn't sink into the characters, it meant I didn't care about any of the events that happened to them. So even though it was like tragedy piled upon tragedy, when I say tragedy, I just feel like the kind of tragedies where it's your own making that's made them that way. And I know it's supposed to be delving into like the generational differences. I just wasn't getting anything out of these stories. There was one short story that I did like. It was one that was written in Patois, and I think because it was written in Patois I could just connect to it a bit more, and I liked that one because it really did a good job of doing what I think all the other stories were trying to do, which is where it slipped between the father's point of view and the son's point of view, and it explored the disconnect that they were feeling between each other. But the fact that they were both speaking in different languages, so to say, with the dad speaking in Patois and the son speaking in not Queen's English but like the American equivalent of Queen's English, it showed that separation all the more. And in that one I just felt so much sympathy for the characters. I don't even know how it happened, but you could just see how their life events meant that they were never going to be on the same page. So it was one short story in this collection of many short stories that I connected to, but otherwise I didn't like this, and it was just a pass for me. The Humans by Haig. I read this one for work reasons. I wouldn't have picked it up otherwise. It is Matt Haig's book where these aliens are sent down to Earth. Well, in particular one alien is sent down to Earth and he's put into the body of a scientist because the scientist has discovered some kind of algorithm that is too advanced for humans, and the aliens are like, they cannot discover this, we need to kill everybody who he told about this phenomenon that he discovered, and you're going to go into the body of a human and do this. But of course, an alien being put into a human's body when they're so very different comes with a lot of troubles and difficulties and ways of navigating life. But as he spends time as a human, he kind of discovers that he cares about this family that he's been put into, and maybe doesn't want to kill all the people that he needs to kill. So this was just so random. It was just so random. Everything that happened, I was like, what? Why is this happening now? It just felt so unsubstantial, the way that everything was so random, and I just couldn't vibe with it. I know that it was trying to be like jokey and funny and humorful in the way that the humans and the aliens were different, but it doesn't have any of the groundbreaking world building to the alienism. It's very like sci-fi if you put it in a contemporary book, and so the humour just fell really flat for me. But also, as Haig often does, it decided to talk about mental health, especially around suicidal thoughts and attempts, and because the book was so weird and wacky and lighthearted and funny, I struggled to feel the deep connection and sensitivity that you kind of need when you're talking about those topics. So this one felt just a bit too weird and random and disjointed for my liking, and it didn't really do anything that I've liked in other Haig books. Then I read a young adult contemporary. I read XOXO by Axie Oh. This one is a young adult book, and it's following a girl called Jenny. She lives in America and she is a celloist, and she's working her butt off so that she can go to a very prestigious orchestral university and do music. Then cue in this guy, and he is a K-pop star, but when Jenny meets him, she doesn't know about K-pop. She's not really interested in that kind of music, so she doesn't know who he is. And I liked this. I thought it was good fun, but ultimately it didn't thrill me or anything in particular. I liked it because it was cute. The relationship that they had was cute. It had forbidden romance elements to it. It had the celebrity ex normal person dating trope, and that is actually one I really love to see. So I quite enjoyed that aspect of it. I think their romance was nice. It did go very fast. It felt like a very tame, quiet, normal romance, and I didn't really see much of the up and downs in a relationship that I kind of expect when it's forbidden. It didn't delve into that tension as much as I thought it could have, played it up with the fact that he's a K-pop star and she's just a person and they have to be very secret. I think they could have done more with the drama that creates. I liked how she gradually became friends with different people. It was just really nice to see those friendship groups. Not only the fact that she makes friends with certain people in the school, but also that you see the K-pop boy band group. I keep saying boy band group because I don't know which term is the correct one, but you see the K-pop group kind of be their own found family to each other, and that's really sweet and that's really cute. I did expect there to be a bit more exploring Korea, as she is a Korean American who had never been to Korea before, but she didn't really venture out beyond the school, so that element wasn't in it. But I can't fault the book for what it is not, just saying that I kind of expected that to play into it a bit more, and it didn't. My biggest qualm with this is that I did not find it believable. I did not find it believable. I think there were so many things where everything just happened to line up in the perfect situation for their romance to work. It was just too unbelievable. And also the fact that these characters have dating bans, which means they're not supposed to be dating anyone, and then so much gets overlooked and like pushed aside for everything to happen that needs to happen. So it just felt a lot of convenience was plugged in there, but it was just like a nice time. It was a good time. If I read this as a teenager, I would enjoy it, but it wouldn't be a new favorite or one I would remember later down the line. I finally read the non-fiction book. You're not going to be able to see anything but the whiteness of it, but this is Quiet by Susan Cain, and the cover is quite quiet, so you can't read it. This is a non-fiction book exploring introversion and the powers of introversion and why it's such a good thing to be an introvert. And I wanted to read this for several years after loving Susan Cain's TED talk on introversion, but I just think I'm a bit too advanced for this book. So personally, I'm someone who's deeply fascinated by, in particular, the MBTI personality tropes like INFJ, ENFP, and all of that jazz. So I've done a lot, and I mean a lot, of research on that. In terms of all the social aspects that she discusses about introversion, I felt like I already knew it. I felt like I already was familiar with this information. I feel like it's one that's better recommended to people who are not familiar with the terms introvert or extrovert, or who want to better live their lives as a happy introvert but don't really know where to start, and they're kind of in the beginner process of accepting and appreciating and valuing their introversion. But I've already surpassed all of that. I'm happy as an introvert. I know lots of information, so this all felt a bit flat to me personally, but it's one that I can recommend to others. I also think it was kind of interesting to see some of the scientific experiments that are done around introversion and social experiments that are done. Lots of these were new to me, so I found those fascinating, but I do feel like a lot of those experiments left out certain external factors because there's so much that builds up your personality, which is why I think MBTI kind of covers a lot of its bases, because it looks at lots of different factors. So for me, it just excluded too many factors for the science to really not be believable, but for me to see those conclusions as like steadfast ones. So I was just a bit disappointed, and I was mostly bored while I was reading this, but I don't think it's a bad book. I just think it's not one for me, for where I am in my introversion journey and with my introversion knowledge. And now we come to my first 5-star new favorite read of the month, and I'm so happy that I read Abandoned by Blake Crouch, because I have been on the hunt for a thriller that is perfect for me. It's literally a straight up thriller, but these characters were living in my fearscape. So in this one, we're following this town called Abandoned, and even though the synopsis really hints at there being supernatural elements, I just assure you that there is not, so don't go in with that expectation. This is thriller through and through. So in the town of Abandoned, one Christmas day, everyone in the town disappears. They're all gone and nobody knows what's happened. But there's also the story that there was a lot of gold there, and now all of that gold is also gone. So all of the people are gone, all of the gold is gone, and that happened several years ago in the past. Cue to the future, where we have this young woman who wants to go to the city of Abandoned to kind of explore it and write an article about it, and she goes with a group of hikers along with a few other people who have interest in it for different personal reasons. and they go there, and it's about what happens when they go there, but also there's a storyline in the past which is explaining how and why all the people disappeared on that Christmas day. I could not stop reading. It was so suspenseful, but unexpectedly it was also so emotional. What I really loved about this one is how it did the two timelines, which doesn't always work for me, and it jumping back and forwards between them. The breaks that are done are timed so well to leave you hooked in the ultimate suspense. I feel like the storyline in the past kind of read like a historical fiction that was really tragic and emotional, and it was believable. As someone who is a very character-driven reader, having it look into specific characters' storylines in the past and what happened to them in particular really just moved me beyond comprehension. And also there was a lot of suspense in the past, because even though certain things had happened, it didn't mean that it was simple. I don't know how to say this without spoilers, but I liked that there was still the thriller-esque element to the historical fiction part of it. In the present day storyline, they are hiking through a snowstorm essentially at some point, and that is my fearscape. Anything cold, disaster zone cold, it scares me to my core. So seeing them having to travel through not only the fearscape, but deal with some of the things that these characters have to deal with, because the terrain is not on their side, but there are also other things that are happening, I'm trying not to spoil anything, that are not on their side. I was just impressed. It was suspenseful, guys. I was on the edge of my seat, but I also started to really care about the characters, in particular a few. And some of these characters know each other, but they have very complicated relationships to each other, and seeing them kind of work through those relationship emotional struggles, but also none of the characters are safe and any character can die at any time. Whew! The ending is perfect. It's the kind of ending that leaves every door closed in a way that's incredibly satisfying, and I was so here for where the book ended, where the characters ended. Just ultimate suspense, ultimate blitz through of a book, and balancing both the emotional and the exciting actiony bits. They did a very good job between being a balance of characters and plot, and I think that's something that thrillers find really difficult to do, and it deployed the thriller short sentences that ramp up that suspense without it happening throughout the whole story. So there's a lot of fluency to the writing. It knows when to write in a certain way and when to kind of bring a bit of a slower style to it. Love, love, love. New favourite. Another 5-star read, a new favourite. This is a collection of poetry called Don't Call Us Dead by Danez Smith, and I've been wanting to read this one for ages, and whew, did it live up to everything that I wanted it to do. So Danez Smith is a queer black poet, and these poems are just filled with the inexplicable emotions that come with probably being someone queer and black. And the poems in this vary in length. There's some really long poems that go across several pages that have like sections to them, and the imagery is just next level. There was so many. I was underlining, like mostly I've been trying to not annotate my poetry unless I'm rereading it, so that I can just take the time to read through the collection completely first and then read through it again and annotate and look deeper. But in this one I just couldn't help myself. I had to annotate upon the first reading because there was just so much that was speaking to my heart and was pulling on my heartstrings. There's a lot in here about the joy that you can find in being queer and black, but also the pains and the difficulties to just exist as queer and black. And as the title says, Don't Call Us Dead, the theme in this that's running through is what it means to be dead, what it means to be alive, what it means to be labelled as dead just for being queer and black while you're still alive. And the way that this collection is so wholesome is how those concepts and imagery is just threaded through each individual poem, while each poem is still unique and encapsulates its own particular idea, subject matter. Absolutely fantastic. It deserves all the awards. I find it hard to sometimes appreciate really short poems, but every short poem in this moved me. I find it amazing when I get a really nice long poem that I can just delve into. I can imagine hearing Danez Smith like read these poems to you would just shatter me entirely. It's really hard for me to review poetry, but this is one of my all-time favourite poetry collections, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what else Danez Smith has out there, because they are doing amazing work. I read Fake Dates and Mooncakes by Sher. It's a very cute book. We're following these two teenagers. One of them is a son of someone who's really rich and wealthy, and one of them is someone who works in his aunt's takeout shop, and he wants to enter the competition where the best mooncake wins some publicity because the takeout shop that he's working in might go under. When he delivers to Theo, they kind of meet, and Theo needs a date for his cousin's wedding, so they kind of end up fake dating. I liked this. It was a really good time. I don't think it's the most mind-blowing thing ever, but at the same time, I was really happy when I was reading this. I couldn't stop reading it. I was having a good time. It was a lot of fun. And sometimes when you read a romance, you know what you want? A lot of fun. One of them, Dylan, has lost his parent more recently, but Theo has lost his mother a long time ago, and they're both kind of grieving and working through those emotions while also discovering the way that they feel about each other. And the fake dating is fun. The family drama is there. They're trying to rescue their small business. It's all there on the table. I loved hearing the descriptions about mooncakes and learning more about the Mid-Autumn Festival. Those are like cultural elements that I hadn't known about before, and now I really want to go out and try some mooncakes. They sound delicious. It's September now, so it's the perfect time for me to get some. And so I just really enjoyed this. I enjoyed seeing the fake dating, which at some point kind of flips the trope as well, and the fake dating doesn't happen for too long, just so you're aware of that if you're going into it for the fake dating, but it's all sweet and it's all cute. My biggest gripe about this is that sometimes it felt a bit writing by numbers, where you can tell that the author has like studied a story and knows that this happens at this time and this, and you can see it while reading. And then the other thing was that I felt like they could have aged the characters up and made this an adult romance book, and it would have suited the story better, and also just been a very, very easy and simple thing to do. Reading this as a young adult, it just didn't fully click with me as a young adult. Some of the conversations they were having just felt very adult. At some point, Theo turns up to family dinner with a bottle of wine. Which teenager is buying wine to bring to a dinner? Like, no, that doesn't happen. Just make them adults. You know, I still had a good time. Oh, this was so cute. Okay, I read a lot of romance, clearly. I read A Princess in Theory by Alyssa Cole, and this one is a Cinderella retelling, black couple, and it's really, really cute. So in this, we're following Nnedi, and she is in grad school. She was put through the foster system, and now she's trying to work in STEM as a black woman, which can be very, very difficult. Cute in the fact that she constantly gets emails from this prince from this country in Africa, and he keeps saying that she is his long lost betrothed, which of course she believes is spam and keeps deleting the emails. He decides to come to New York City and find his betrothed and meet her for himself. It's very sweet. I didn't know it was a Cinderella retelling when I started, but I was so glad to find that out because it has all of the Cinderella-esque elements to it, but a lot of this, when it was talking about their romance, it was really focusing on the concept of trust. I like that so much time in this romance was given to trust and what it means to trust someone and to be yourself around someone, and I think a lot of romances just kind of take that for granted and skip through some of the discussions and the difficulties that come with people who are not emotional needing to open up their emotions. So I appreciated how much time was given to that in terms of the emotional relationship that develops, but I also had a lot of fun with the fact that it is a royal romance. That trope is there. There's a moment where there's fake dating involved, and I'm a fake dating lover, as you can see from the books that I read this month, so I got to have all of the fun tropes that I like. There are some steamy scenes in this, so do be aware that you're going to get a bit of steam, and those scenes aren't what I call the highest level of steam. I think they're medium level. They're there, they're present, and I enjoyed them, but they didn't like flood the story and take over. I think my only thing about this is that the ending was really predictable. Yet again, I just want to repeat, this is a Cinderella retelling, so the ending is going to be predictable either which way, but I did find the ending predictable, it's worth me mentioning, and I do think the ending had a separate storyline that had to do with some of the medical side of this book, and that ended really, really quickly. It was like the ending was super rushed, but I don't mind it too much because it was a fun, enjoyable reading. Oh my goodness, this month I read Who Fears Death by Nnedi Okorafor, which I got from my Waypoint book subscription box, and my vlog is up so you can see my thoughts develop as I read this book. But my oh my, I gave this book 5 stars. It's a new favourite and it's one of the best books that I have read this year. So this one is following Onyesonwu. She is born in the desert and her mum and her are nomads for a while until they stumble across this village, and in this village Onyesonwu discovers that she has these abilities and these gifts, and she is angry about the way that the whole of society is functioning and the way that the society treats her because she looks a bit different from everyone else. And alongside that, her powers enable her to have the ability to realize that somebody wants her dead. I adored this book. Listen, let me tell you, this book, it's giving all the desert fantasy vibes that you want. It does that setting so well. It is seeped into the story's core, and as someone who is always thirsty for desert fantasies but we don't see them done enough, this served everything I wanted it to. The world building is just beyond my greatest dreams. It manages to explain everything. It does a good job of explaining her gifts, how they function. She discovers them, but the whole training montage scene is not too long, so it's never too boring. And just seeing how the world is set up in this, how believable it is and how intricate and extensive it is, I could believe that this world exists on another planet. Absolutely fascinating. At its core, I just adored all of the characters, and I felt like this was a very realistic depiction of characters because you're even meeting new characters halfway through, but it's never overwhelming. Some characters drop out of the story, some come in, some make it out alive and some don't, but I loved each and every one of them. I adored Onyesonwu, I adored Mutwa, I adored Luyu. Those were three of my favourites. Fanasi, even he had a space in my heart. It all is just so realistically created. Onyesonwu, she's an outcast and people don't like her just because of the way that she looks, and this book does a good job of showing how you can be lonely and you can feel excluded and alone and upset and angry while also not being alone, because her mother cares about her so much, and she does have this wonderful female friendship group that are around her, and she eventually does have like a romantic partner whose partnership almost feels like, yeah, a partnership more than a romantic typical relationship that we see. And I appreciated that she was surrounded by so much love and her community, while at the same time she was experiencing experiences that none of them would ever truly be able to understand simply because of who she was, having to contend with the loneliness, with the togetherness. It was done fantastically. This book was intersectional feminism, no doubt. I love the way that the intersectional feminist moments were woven into the story so they felt natural, but they didn't disappear. Every now and again I'd be like, yes girl, you do it, you tell them, but it wasn't forced in any which way. The plot was suspenseful. It was amounting to something where it felt like the outcome was inevitable, but it still managed to surprise me, and along the way lots of things were thrown in that I just didn't expect to have to face, or for these characters to have to face. I couldn't, you know when you love a book so much you tend to read it faster and you fly through it? I have one step above that, where I love a book so much that I'm flying through it and then I slow myself down because I want to savor it and drink in every word. And this happens to about 1 or 2 books every year, and this was the book that it happened to me for this year. It was absolutely fantastic, hands down. Wonderful. I hope you all go and read it. It was Women in Translation month last month, and I read Freshwater for Flowers by Valerie Perrin. This is translated from French, and I gave this book 5 stars. And it was also a new favourite. I had a very good month last month. So this is a literary fiction book, and we're following a woman who works at the cemetery. She's the cemetery keeper. She really likes her job and she's doing it very well. Her husband has been out of action, not in her life, for several years past, when one day a man shows up at the cemetery who needs to bury someone, and he doesn't know why his mother wants her ashes to be laid on this stranger's grave, but also he comes bringing news of her long missing husband. So that is the concept between Freshwater for Flowers, and oh my goodness, I was in emotional heartbreak throughout reading this book. It does such a good job of showing and depicting a kind of grief that's unfathomable unless you've experienced it yourself, and it shows how that kind of grief enumerates and digs into every single part of your life, your relationships, your job, everything about you is just not the same when you feel that level or experience this particular type of grief. And I don't want to say it because I want you to discover it yourself, and I'll have content warnings in the description below, but my oh my, was it painful. And also the way that this grief occurred, or the way that circumstances happened to lead up to this grief, you could just see it. And The magnificent thing about this book is that it's following these two characters in particular where their relationship is the most important thing, and you see everything from one person's point of view and you make up your mind about how the other character is and everything, but then you get their point of view as well, and it shifts your perception of them completely. And while it doesn't excuse or erase all the emotions that you've built up about them, you just understand things from another perspective, and I think perspective was wielded so well here. But the writing is also just absolutely gorgeous. It's not purple or overdone, but it's just deeply rooted in emotion the whole way through. The characters in this were just so realistic, they were complex, they were emotional, and the different relationships that we get to see, because you don't only get to see one in particular relationship, it just felt so valid to see both those friendships but also those connections that strangers can have, because she is a cemetery keeper, which means she's coming into contact with people who are grieving all of the time, and seeing the way that she connects to them and interacts with them was just, it touched my heart. It was beautiful to read, it was so well done, and it's one of those depictions of grief. As someone who reads about grief and identity, it was so interesting to see how those two things fuse together, but also just how deeply it dug into the subject of grief and the different types. I can't recommend it more. Hana, Cain Carries On by Uzma Jalaluddin. And this is a You've Got Mail retelling where the characters are Muslim and the business that they're in are restaurants. Now, when I started this book, I had never watched You've Got Mail, so I started this book and I was like, what are the odds that this situation is how it is? I don't believe it, it's unrealistic. Then I went and watched the trailer of You've Got Mail because I wanted to know how much of that was the book's fault and how much was it's a retelling of this particular story, and that's just the way the story goes. I've since watched the trailer of You've Got Mail and it makes sense that this book is so what are the odds situation. It's all got to do with You've Got Mail, so I don't fault the book for that whatsoever, and I'm not judging my review based on that element to it. It is a retelling of that story, so of course those story elements are going to be there. It is what it is. So I think it was a good You've Got Mail retelling, says someone who hasn't seen the film, because it managed to stick to the best points of the film but kind of takes out some of the problematic elements, which I discovered through talking with people about the book on Instagram. I really liked the characters. I think they were nice, especially our main character. She was going through a big identity crisis and had to do a lot of thinking, and I appreciated that she took her time with that and she didn't rush any of her decisions. As far as I can understand, the Muslim representation is really good in this one and everybody seems perfectly content with it. It talks about what it means to be Muslim in the contemporary times, with a focus on largely microaggressions, but at a particular time it starts to look into a hate crime that happens and how it affects all of the characters. What I liked about this as well is that it doesn't have your standard happily ever after ending that you might expect in a romance, and I'm saying this for certain storyline threads. I'm trying to say, in the typical way, expect your happily ever after, but also be aware that it might not be the happily ever after you would think of. So I liked how it did something a bit refreshing with that. I struggled a lot with the romance in this. It's an enemies to lovers, and I didn't know that before I went in. I'm not a big fan of enemies to lovers, and even though I think it did it reasonably well enough, it just doesn't tickle my fancy, so I didn't really get behind the romance in the way that I probably could have if it was a trope that I appreciate a bit more. This is an adult book, and it was another situation where I read these characters and I thought you could have aged them down to teenagers, and I feel like that would have been more realistic, because the way that they are talking and the way that she's reflecting on herself, it just struck me as very suitable to young adult, and also maybe it would have been a bit more convincing if it was young adult. She says that she's 24 in the beginning, and if you erase that and you erase the epilogue, I could have fully expected her to be a teenage person, and that's kind of what I was envisioning when I was reading, more or less. Oh, and I wanted to mention that I liked all of the restaurant talk. There's a lot of podcast and radio talk, and I actually have no interest in podcast and radio. I don't listen to any of them, and it's not my kind of jam, but I think if it is your kind of jam, you might also enjoy this book a bit more than I did. We have Rootless by Krystle, Zara, Appiah, and this is a adult fiction book where we are following these two black characters. They fall in love with each other, but they both want very different things from their life. So she doesn't want any children, she wants to be free to pursue her creative arts, whereas he has a very keen plan for how his law degree and life is going to go, and he is a big family man and he wants children. In the beginning I was quite frustrated. There are time jumps of a year between each chapter, and I didn't want those time jumps. I wanted to stay in those moments and see more about their life. But as we get further into the book, the time differences or the time jumps narrow in time length, and you start to understand why you had those big jumps, because it needed to set up certain things to get to the meat of the story, and you appreciate what you've learned about them in the past once you get to the bigger tensions that happen later on in the story. I think it did a very good job of showing their characters. You get such a clear understanding of who these two people are in this couple, what they expect out of a relationship, and the agreements that they stand by. And I always think when it comes to books where one person wants children and the other person doesn't want children, have that conversation before. It's a very easy conversation to have, and realize and acknowledge whether you're compatible or not. These characters actually do that, and yet they still are in the situation that they're in. So don't worry about it being like really frustrating or silly why they ended up in this predicament. It explains itself, it makes sense, and it actually just, it functions well for the story. It really just does such a good job of showing the pressures and the standards that black women, especially black women from certain cultural identities, have to face when it comes to the fact that they don't want children, that they want to pursue the creative arts. This character, she was given such a hard time, and I couldn't help but feel for her and understand why she made every single choice that she did. I fully could connect to her and believe her, and saying that, even though I didn't agree with lots of the choices he made, I fully understand why he made the choices that he made in these situations too. So you could see both sides of the story, you could really connect to them, and I just wanted to know what the outcome would be. And it was interesting seeing it unravel, seeing the outcome, seeing how it affected them, their friends, their families, and the people around them. Then the ending happened, and the ending happened, and it was kind of perfect. And I think this is just such a very effective book for talking about feminism, largely feminism, but also feminism and relationships, because relationships do take compromise, relationships do take sacrifice. And often I think these days we talk about independence within relationships, which is incredibly valid and still something we need to learn. But I also think there's room to talk about the times where you do need to discuss and compromise and lay out all of your goals and dreams. See where things go. The actions that follow the discussions are almost, or definitely are, as important as the discussions themselves. It's fascinating. This book made me think, and I fully recommend it. And then last but not least, I read Sorry Bro by Taleen Voskuni. This is an adult romance book where we're following our Armenian American main character. Her boyfriend proposes to her, and she realizes that's not something that she wants at all. So she decides she's going to let her mother have a field day and do some matchmaking. And she wants to date other American Armenian people to see if this works out. But the truth of the matter is that she's bisexual, and she hasn't come out to her mother. And in the process of being match made for, she meets a woman she really likes. So I had really mixed thoughts about this book, and I still don't think they've settled. I was absolutely fascinated learning so much about Armenian culture. I have to admit, I knew nothing. I literally knew nothing about Armenian culture before. Despite having gone to an international school and travelled so much, I've actually never met anybody who's Armenian before. So it was all new to me. I was fascinated by the descriptions of culture, cultural practices, languages, food. It's all kind of included in this, and it was just amazing to learn about. I struggled with our main character. She seemed very judgmental, and she would judge people for doing exactly the things that A, she either set them up to do, or B, she does herself. And I found that really kind of problematic and selfish, and I didn't really like her as a main character. I also think this one, as someone who doesn't enjoy reading about cheating, there's a lot of essentially cheating. It basically is what it is, because she's stringing on the person who tried to propose to her while also going around and matchmaking with other people. Something I liked about this book is how inclusive it is of family, and how she's so happy to have her mother matchmaking for her. I think often when it comes to like the mother is meddling and matchmaking, it's always seen as a negative thing. So it's kind of nice to see someone appreciating and taking advantage of the fact that the mother is willing to do this for them. And then the bisexual relationship, I really don't know how to feel about this, and as someone who isn't bisexual, I can't really speak on this. So I looked into a lot of Own Voices reviews, and a lot of people are saying that it's quite biphobic, the way that it presents bisexuality as a choice a lot of the time in this book. But also, I personally felt uncomfortable with the fact that certain things had to happen for the ending to happen, and the things that happen largely felt not about earning a relationship or trying to make a relationship work, but were all kind of self-identity markers that she had to rush through to be able to get the ending that she wanted to get out of the book. And I just felt like these are not romantic things, these are self-discovery things, and actually if you take the romance out of this book, it's a character exploring their culture and their identity, their sexual identity, and discovering who they are and gradually feeling motivated to do the things that they need to do to be and live as their authentic self. And I find it problematic that a romance seems to be introduced only for her to make those discoveries about herself, and I don't think that's the way we want to conceptualize romance, as something that puts you on your character development journey, if that makes any sense. So I found that whole depiction of romance troubling, and I wasn't that invested in the romance because though it's sweet and stuff, it didn't really run that deep. It basically presented the love interest as an angel for everything to be able to work. The cover is gorgeous. I did read this very quickly, like I sped through it because I was fascinated by the cultural elements and the family relationship, so I had that going for it. That kept me turning the pages. There's all the books that I read in the month of August. It was a really up and down month for me. I had some lows, I had some middles, and I had a lot of highs as well. But please let me know in the comment section down below what was the latest book that you have read, and what did you rate it, and what did you think? Have you read any of these books that I read? Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, hit the subscribe button if you want to see more, and don't forget to hit that notification bell to be updated every time I have a new video. And you know what they say, onwards and upwards. Excelsior!